Megan, take that in.
Too heavy.
New neighbours?
They have a wee girl. She's cute.
Cuter than me.
Is Megan settling in school?
Aye.
They just have them writing these journals, you know. Aye, Josie did one. My daughter, she's not with us anymore.
Josie. Can you give me a lift?
I'm sure your mommy's on her way.
Oh, please, I'm freezing.
Come on.
I was here before.
She says she's been to the graveyard. Well, she's never been here. The wee girl puts me in mind of Josie.
Should be about the same age.
When we came here before, I was too small for these, wasn't I? You've never been here before. We have. There was a yellow thing. A fish.
She knows places Josie.
Josie! You're starting to worry me here now.
I understand that I sound crazy.
Megan is not Josie.
How do you know?
Just leave us alone, please.
I don't know what's the problem.
You?
It's my yard.
Do you want to come to the car for 1 wee second?
I'm supposed to be in school.
Don't tell your mommy. She's always been here. She'll help us through this.
Stacey, first of all, really love your film, and I wanted to know. Great, by the way, great Patsy Cline thing on the back.
Oh, thanks.
But I was looking at a previous interview, and you were talking about your Soho meeting with Andrea. Can you just talk about how that meeting went, and did you immediately know, as far as that you were like-minded when it came to work ethic and the approach of your craft, just on that one meeting, or did it take a succession of just conversations?
I honestly, I think that meeting did it. Like, it's just, you just know sometimes when you meet someone, you know. And I think in the industry, and also because I come from a theatre industry, one of the things that you have to do is read people very quickly and connect very quickly. It's, you know, it's I think it's part of the creative skill set. And yeah, as soon as we met, we sat down, you know, we ordered a little snack and jumped in, you know. And I could feel, you know, Andrea wanted to deep dive, you know, wanted to, you know, get stuck into the big stuff. And we chatted about some of the big ideas and themes of the film and how we like to work. And that was that, really, you know. It's a bit of a dreamy story. And, you know, fantastic.
You were also mentioning that this story was pretty much in your subconscious, in your head for quite a while. How long was that quite a while? And then also, did the story mature as you matured as a person? Because this is a very layered story about trauma and grief, and most importantly, about family.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny, as I've done a few more interviews and talked a little bit about this. You know, yes, the story was, the seed of the story really was with me from I was a kid about Megan's age, because I was like into the paranormal and I was a bit troublesome and imaginative. And so there was definitely a seed there. But I think reflecting as well the kind of stories I tell and the landscape, you know, I grew up in, you know, 90s Belfast. It was quite a tough place to grow up. And, you know, we were living through a lot of everyday trauma. We were surrounded as kids by teachers and parents talking in code, by pretty heavy stuff on the news every night. And I think actually reflecting on this film and how I internalized a lot of that, and the dynamics between the families and the kids, and then what's layered into the landscape as well. So I guess it feels a little nebulous, but I guess what I'm saying is the story was with me for a long time. But I think how I approached the story and how the film subsequently developed drew on some of those things that might have been quite deeply in me for a long time.
After watching this movie, the moniker HereBefore is very resonant without giving too much away. Can you speak to what that title means for you? Because in one sense, the idea of grief and the supernatural, those can be mixed. But in many ways, this movie is about reality, that no matter who leaves you, don't assume that they're going to be gone, that they're always going to be a part of your life. I thought that was very touching for me to, someone who's lost someone as well. So can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was really important always to me, is that there's room here, and the film is experienced quite differently by a different audience. And I love that. And I think the same could be said of love and grief, and the rationale that we each have and how we navigate our way through that. And I've mentioned a fair bit this letter that Nick Cave wrote in after the loss of his son, and the reason I mention that is because he so succinctly touched on those things. He talks about willing our spirits, and they talk to us and they lead us out of the darkness. And there's a sort of spirituality in that I think speaks to Irish culture as well, and the way we deal with death. We celebrate it. We have wakes, we have open coffins. It's very different, for example, even when I'm over in England. And so I think keeping those things alive and coexisting, I love that. I love that nothing is tied up neatly with a ribbon. I love that by the time we reach the end of this film, people have different experiences of reality, and they can coexist. And that's interesting to me. There's an explanation there if you want it. Some people in the film reject that.
I loved your film on this level, but also on a level of a cinephile. When you read reviews and just comparing your work to someone like a Nicholas Roeg, and people actually theorizing that, if you did just a genre horror thriller film, you could easily knock it out of the park. How do you feel about that, especially with your roots grounded in the theater? Is that a great compliment? And is that a road that you might even travel down the road? Because that's something I think you could really master, and you've already mastered it in a certain way.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, of course it's incredible to have people respond like that and, mention some of the greats. I think if I consciously went out and tried to do anything like that, I'd probably not achieve it. And so I think trying to stay true to your own artistic vision and voice is really key. So in the same way, I think I've been quite an eclectic artist. It hasn't been a very linear. I didn't wake up and go, I'm going to be a cinema director and I'm going to make this kind of a film. So for me, the curiosity is always the driving force. And if the next project that I make is an out and out genre, great. There's no reason why that wouldn't be the case. But at the same time, I'm not don't think I'm out to make the next successful whatever. I need to, it needs to present itself to me, and then I'll make that as best as I can. So I'm as excited as the next person to see what comes next.
Dumb question, an obvious question. Why is Andrea not considered one of the great actors working? We know why you were nervous for the Soho meeting, but what the heck is going on here?
Oh my gosh!
You have a theory?
No, I don't. I wonder if she's on the cusp of that. And it's because she's a chameleon as well. And so I think for a long time people didn't realize it was Andrea that was popping up in so many films, because she is, so eclectic and really immerses herself in these roles. But I think she has a great following, and there's a lot of love for her out there. So I obviously think she's one of the greats. But yeah, I think that time, Queen Andrea.
Also, just during the edit, during the time of COVID, obviously you have an editor working with you, but did the edit change when you're in that solitary mode? Because I think a lot of this movie, it actually lets the viewer participate and actually round out the sentences. You don't spell the movie out. And I'm just wondering, did that aesthetic sort of emerge during maybe the period of just maybe a little bit of isolation, or maybe are those two different things?
No, I think that's a really interesting question. I haven't thought about it before in that way. I would say that I knew when I was making the film that silence would be a big part of it, that I wanted to create space, that I am an unfussy filmmaker in the sense that I want to let the camera turn over and invite an audience in, and get out of the way and let the performers do their thing. Having said that, it's interesting because the edit was such a quiet time, such a silent time, and such a lonely time. It may well be the case that some of that found its way into the film. I'm sort of casting my mind back now to think about that, but there was something very meditative about those months, and I think that is a quality that did crystallize during that period of post with the film.
Right, and just wondering your reaction to how many people have seen it? Have you had screenings, and just the reactions of people coming up to you regarding? And I'm sure people share their own stories with their family with you after watching this film.
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time I hadn't shared it, and it was really tough. And as much as I was grateful for, virtual screenings, the film is cinematic. It was designed to be shared communally. Like, that's the kind of beast I am, So finally I got to see it with an audience at Belfast Film Festival, and that's my hometown. So it just felt, and for people to see on screen people who look and sound like them, that's a big deal. We haven't, for a long time, we didn't really have many cinematic representations of ourselves. And at the end of it, people came up and were quite affected and wanted to talk. And I always find that very moving and very validating, because, their experience was what I had hoped. I think the film does want to gesture towards something quite comforting, ultimately, and it's going to be really fascinating now. I finally get to share the film properly, and I'm so thrilled as well, that it's got this theatrical release, that people will be in cinemas watching it, because it's a tough time for indie films.
Stacey, final question, very impossible question, but right off the top of your head, can you name one of your all-time favorite films, and what is it about this film that still speaks to you today, not just as a cinephile, but as a filmmaker as well?
Do you know a film that ended up bouncing around my head a lot through this process is Todd Haynes' Safe? It's one of his earlier films, and I think it's really underrated. And I think it shares this sort of philosophical horror that is really sort of low key, but so sort of designed. And it's, if you or your listeners haven't checked it out, it's definitely worth a revisit.
Stacey, thank you so much for your time. I really loved HereBefore, and congrats on your film.
Thank you so much. Lovely chatting to you.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye.